That's good. Upgrade Rodney. Panelist.
Hi, Karen. Okay.
You should upgrade it.
Two Rodneys.
Here we go.
We've got our recording light on.
It's on.
This is the Wednesday, August 27th, 2025 meeting of the Mayor's Blue Ribbon Committee on the Municipal Building. And I'll call the roll. We don't have Kate Coyle, but we have
Buzz Sure,
from the
Police Commission.
Police Commission, John O'Leary. Yeah, here. Cameron Horak.
Present.
Yep. Peter Weeks.
Here.
Mary Lou McElwain.
Here.
Rick Chelman. Here. Councillor Kate Cook. Our co-chair, and I'm Councillor John Tabor. And from staff, we have Peter Rice and Joe Almeida. And from JSA,
Richard Marks.
Richard Martz.
And sorry, co-chairs, City Manager Karen Conner on Zoom.
That's right.
And in addition, Rodney McManus, part of the team, the design team, is online as well.
ADG. And we also have the Deputy Chief here, Michael. Here. And first item is the approval of the July 23rd minutes. Has everyone had a chance to read them?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
And first up, in planning this meeting, the city manager and Councillor Cook and I learned about Bangor, Maine, which has just built a new municipal facility and had wisdom to share with us. Who would like to introduce them?
I'd be happy to take that, Councilor Tabor. We had the pleasure, Carl Weber and I had the pleasure of speaking with Jefferson Davis, who's the city engineer for Bangor, and Jefferson is joining us just now. And he's a really kind person to spend some time with us, and he sounds like he was chief cook and bottle washer at the time of construction, because the city manager and the finance director left, and he was the only man standing. So I think about 3 weeks ago, if not 2 weeks ago, the city hall reopened. And the reason we found this to be a relatively similar and interesting project was fairly similar sized community, reuse of a building that was not built to be a community-oriented, public customer-facing city hall type building. And so Carl and Jefferson and I spent about 45 minutes yesterday talking about lessons learned and what might be relevant to this group. Maybe they served as a guinea pig for things we can avoid. But honestly, Jefferson was just a breath of fresh air to talk to. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jefferson. And Jefferson is kind enough to share a screen to show some plans and some conceptuals and to show kind of the before and after, or at least walk us through it for a few minutes. So if it's okay with you, I'll turn it over to him directly.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Welcome, Jefferson.
Thank you very much. So I'll share my screen real quick, see if I can do that.
If you need help, let us know.
Alrighty. So I think everybody's seeing a floor plan right now.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to move this over here. So we are in Bangor, Maine, which is about an hour north of the state capital, Augusta, which you probably all know where we are. But City Hall, everybody can see my cursor moving around.
Yep.
Yes.
So this is City Hall, which is right downtown Bangor, Maine. It's an old building that was originally built as a federal building, turned into a post office, and then in 1961 or so, it became City Hall. Not much for renovations have been done to it since it originally was built. When the post office took over, they did some stuff to update, landings and that sort of stuff to make it work for the post office. But when the city hall took over, they just moved in, and whatever was there was there. So just pre-COVID, the city put out a referendum for the voters to approve $6 million in renovating City Hall to make it more secure, to update all the mechanical equipment, to bring all the public-facing departments down on one floor so the public can just come in, do their business on one floor. They don't have to roam three floors. And also that helps create the employee areas a little more secure. So again, it's right downtown, heart of Bangor. Let's see, I do have some photos.
Jefferson, you said it's 3 stories, right? So in that regard, it's similar to City Hall.
Yes, it is. It's
Okay.
3 stories.
While you're pulling up the photos, just for reference, how does Bangor track on population? And I know you guys are a big tourist hub, so there's some similarities there, I'm sure, in the summertime, and that your population swells and then normalizes in the winter. But what's your base?
Our population swells like any city in the daytime. Our base is just over 30,000. During the day, it swells to 90,000.
Right.
We're the hub of northern Maine.
Right.
So, we have at the airport, the closest mall, and all those amenities that are around it. And so we're just a service hub. So, I'm sorry?
Thank you. I said that sounds familiar. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. So actually, I have on my screen a floor plan. I know it's a little hard to see, but this is the first floor where the main public is going to be at, or is at now. So what we created was just a central hub, a corridor where my cursor is, where the public can stay. Employees are back here, and they're secured with doors with key card access. We brought council chambers, used to be on the 3rd floor. We brought that down to the 1st floor, which is in this corner here. And we also created conference rooms where my cursor's located, and some small meeting rooms for employees to use, but also if Treasury or a clerk or planning or code need to meet with an angry citizen, they can certainly meet in one of those spaces. So I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but just to give some background. Before our renovation, City Hall, the 1st floor had the city clerk's office, Treasury, and code. 2nd floor had part of the school department, engineering, legal, and planning and economic development. 3rd floor had finance, HR, and the city manager's office, and also just one meeting room, which was council chambers. So again, like I said earlier, the main goal was to get all the public-facing departments on the 1st floor. So that's code, planning, economic development, Treasury, city clerk, assessing. Now they are all on the 1st floor. They have tower windows around that corridor. We actually ended up doing like a bulletproof system with the speaker in front. And then all those employees, all those department employees, either have offices in the back or have, we set up cubicle systems kind of interior. And I can kind of show you some of what it looked like versus what it, let's see now. I'm sorry, I thought I had this all ready to go. Any questions, just feel free to jump in and
We appreciate it.
Was your City Hall chamber, did that total space get smaller?
no, I think we kept it about the same. Actually, I think just by minimal square feet, I don't know, like 30 or 40 square feet, I think smaller. So we were able to maintain that. But so Old City Hall, as you can see, this was our old boiler room. We had just ancient boilers that weren't efficient.
That looks a lot similar to ours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then this is what the main first floor looked like just old, outdated, a lot of wasted space. This was like customer service. People just kind of circled around looking for everything, didn't know where to go. The lighting was bad, air quality was bad, mechanical was bad. This is just some of the side building. It was just old and outdated. So let's see now. So the corridor now looks something like this. So we tried to, when it was first built as a federal building, it had some nice architectural details with the windows, with the ceiling grid. A lot of the molding was left in place, but when the post office came in, they lowered the ceilings. They cut through some of that architectural molding. So part of this plan was to expose that and refinish what we could. So that's like up in here. That's all just existing molding that we just refinished. We put in a new lobby and sliding doors. These front facing. This is clerk and treasury, but now they all have teller. We had to work around existing columns and stuff like that, which we always do in these old buildings. But this is kind of what it looks like versus what it was. It's a tremendous improvement to what we had. The employees are secure. So the bulletproof panels for the glass, plus even the wall panels are all bulletproof too. So people feel much more comfortable now working behind the scenes there. Council chambers, I can kind of show what we did for that. We have a new DS, for the council. So we have a 9 council member. We added community meeting tables and for the public. We put sound deafening boards everywhere. And of course, the main component of this whole building was mechanical. So, we have heat and AC now in every room. And we also put a dedicated outdoor air system on the roof. So that brings in fresh air all through the building now. So it is so much different speed in this building now than it was before. And literally before, to turn the heat on or turn it off, it was go in the basement, flip the big lever, and then it was 100 degrees, and then you go down and flip the big lever, and it was 0 degrees. So it was really inefficient.
How long did the renovations take you?
20 months.
20 months.
20 months.
What did you do with the city employees while the renovations were occurring?
So we actually rented a separate spot and moved everybody out. Part of this project was to put a new ADA accessible elevator kind of in the center of the building. So in Maine, we're built on ledge everywhere, so we actually had to hammer out inside of the building. No employees were going to stick on the 2nd or 3rd floor while that was happening. It just wasn't going to be safe. We wouldn't be able to get people in and out. So we were lucky. We found a spot, 2 blocks down the road from us that took everybody except engineering. I was lucky enough to find a small building on the waterfront just for our little group.
Just a coincidence, I'm sure.
Yeah, just a coincidence.
What did that cost you for rental for that 2-year period?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can get that to the city manager to distribute, but I don't have those numbers. That was engineering was not part of that fee for that. So yeah, anything construction related, I can tell you, but some of those aspects I don't have in front of me.
Jefferson, you did not do a phased project then. The entire project was worked through effectively all at once, where the entire building was shut down, you guys went through all the work and reopened it all contemporaneously.
Yes.
Jefferson, how many staff were moved out of the building?
Close to 100.
Okay.
Had you done a phased project, do you have any idea of what the timeline shift would have been? How much incremental time and costs that might have added or subtracted?
So it would have added, I think, roughly $500,000 to the contract. The way it was written initially for the contract was we were going to phase it. We were going to move some people out, mostly the first floor folks. They were going to move out. Second floor, we would get shipped around and kind of work around it. But when we selected the contractor during interviews, they came and said, listen, it's going to be an absolute nightmare to do that in the face, just with our layout and how we have parking available here. So they said, we will give you $500,000 back if you move out and take the building over and go. So that money saved, was used for rent and some other things.
But speaking of money, Jefferson, you had mentioned at the outset that the project was projected to be $6 million, and it came in roughly at about $10 million.
When we did our initial concepts, pre-COVID or just after COVID, we had an initial cost estimate around $6 million. When we actually went through design development and that sort of phase, the cost came in much higher. The architects, their last cost estimate before we put it out to bid was close to around just over $9 million. But so much time had gone between when we put the referendum out to when we actually got final bid packages in. Of course, everything just had skyrocketed. So a big part of this project was life and safety with new mechanical, new lighting, the ADA elevator upgrade. I think we added a big generator in the back to cover the whole building. So city management used life safety costs as a reason for the increase, and they were able to find money somewhere for that.
Did that $10 million include the cost of renting space during the renovation? Renting space for the 100 employees?
No, that $10 million is just for construction costs. Just what we, just for our prime contractor, benchmarkers we used. So that $10 million went to them. Then we had added costs for rent-in, move-in, all those types. We ended up moving our IT server into a secured outbuilding outside of City Hall. So that added some costs, but and then of course we had to move people back in, which so that $10 million was just for construction. It wasn't for some of those added costs and moving employees and renting and that sort of thing.
What was the total square footage that you did?
Let me pull that up. So let's see. Now that you asked me, let me pull up. Hold on 1 second. I want to say the first floor is around 14,000 square feet. Second floor, so that was total re-got everything. Second floor and third floor, all we did on the second, third floor was just mechanical and the elevator lobby. So we were doing the mechanical on the second, third floor. Most places got new ceiling grids and everything. But the second and third floor is only around 11,000 square feet because the second and third floor it's like a U shape. So the interior behind the building, there's a flat roof on the first floor. But the total renovation for the first floor was around 14,000 square feet.
Jefferson, do you have any other pictures of the individual customer-facing tower windows or anything like that?
I do.
That's a good storage. I remember that story.
Yeah. So a big part of our design development was looking at storage. What does each department need for file storage? Because we're an older city. This building's been here for 1960, so since 1960 we just have hundreds of file cabinets that probably don't need to be full all the time. A lot of that information could be gone, could be digitized. So we spent a lot of time looking through that to what we actually need. And to save space, we went with the high density filing systems, which is on my screen here. So you can actually, they're about 7.5 feet to 8 feet tall. But you actually hit a button, the panels move out, and they're a huge file saver. The only thing is these are not fire rated. So like if we don't have sprinklers in City Hall, we were able to get by without that. But if there is a fire, they do close up, but they can still allow smoke and that sort of stuff in. So our critical vital records had to go into a fireproof safe and that sort of stuff. But this high density file storage unit has I think is working out fantastic for us. It saves a lot of space. The only thing is, which I mentioned to the city managers, we have a lot of people that are under 6 feet tall working in the city, so the top shelf is kind of hard. I think not your everyday storage is going to be on the top shelf. They have a hard time to reach.
And in follow up to that, you mentioned be judicious with protecting allocation of space for storage because you want to make sure you account for that.
Account for that.
And you also mentioned the conversion of folks from individual offices in that old style building to kind of a cube farm and having a different office environment to have to get used to.
Yeah. So, in projects like this, of course, you're not going to make everybody happy. We had a lot of folks that were in offices before. So when they moved to the first floor, the decision was made that that main area, employee area behind the tele windows, were going to be like cubicles. So that was a struggle for the first week or so when we moved everybody back in. We've had to make some adjustments for some folks, but now that we've been in here for a few weeks, people are getting used to it. I use a headset. I'm using one right now. People just have to adjust to that, but it does save some space and some money if you can go that route. And a lot of our departments downstairs don't need the space like engineering. I need, because we have layout tables and all this stuff for our large worksheets and stuff like that, and plans. But mostly downstairs, everybody's digitized with everything, so you really don't need that much space.
Question. Did you hire a firm to digitize, or was that done in-house?
We did.
On the files.
So before we moved, we did that quite a bit on ourselves, but we actually have, in the basement, we have a lot of files, and in old council chambers on the third floor, we have a lot of files that we are going to be hiring people to digitize things. So.
Any other good photos that might represent what the customer would see?
So this is kind of like a false wall that separates some of the tellers to where the employees are, and we just decorated it with old photos of the city. So it gives those employees a sense of privacy from the public. Let me go back into images here. I apologize, sir.
No
We
apologies.
appreciate your insight.
Just pulling up some. So this is what the front of City Hall looks like, if anybody's interested in seeing it. It's an old granite building. It was a design that there's a sister building in like Minnesota, but it's actually granite, and it's not granite from Maine or New Hampshire. It came from I think New York, which is kind of weird, but we didn't do much today outside. We did a big window project a few years ago to upgrade the windows or redo the windows, but as part of this project, we did repoint the building, so we didn't have any leaks coming into the renovated space.
Was there any added insulation or anything like that on the inside of the walls to?
No, the exterior walls kind of stay the same. It's all masonry walls, so we didn't do too much of that. Just trying to find some good photos of the interior. So this is, this is leading into the council chambers. This is some of the what I talked about earlier, the windows that we tried to refinish and maintain, keep some of that old architectural, but add, we had some good interior decorators that helped with new light and pendants that are, a little bit different than what we've seen in Bangor. But let me find some Teller stuff. I showed you a picture of this hallway, plain and coded down here, but it was just, these were the public bathrooms are. So we kept the same space for the public bathrooms, just redid everything. Let's see now. So this is the city clerk and treasury. So you can see we have the bulletproof glass with a little window that little panel there actually can fit a license plate. So that was what we tested that because in Maine this year, they're rolling out all new license plates. So the city clerk came to me and was like, "Hey, did we ever test to see if an actual license plate fits through that?" And luckily it did. But that's some of the sort of stuff you need to look at, which didn't really come across when I was part of this project. But we do have ADA panels too. If anybody was wondering, that's what these little shelves are. That is ADA compliant. So, some of the meeting rooms, these are new meeting rooms. We actually have AV in there now. But again, we were able to maintain that architectural feature of the windows. So, all in all, it was a really good project for us in the city.
If you were to start over again today, is there anything you would have done differently?
Yeah, I think there would have been quite a bit. One of the things I would have done differently, so the way the city of Bangor usually handles projects, we have a pretty good IT department that can do cabling and all the data work. So in our smaller buildings that we renovate, IT usually takes care of that. And for some reason that was decided that was going to be the case with this renovation. That ended up being a nightmare. You had your prime contractor doing one thing, then we had the city coming in doing another thing. Those contractors that we're working with would say, "That's not my mess, that's your mess. I didn't make that hole in that wall, you made that hole in that wall." Absolute nightmare. So I would make sure that all your security, all your AV equipment, all your data pulling is all done with the same prime contract. They'll sub it out all anyway, but then you have someone to blame, and it's a lot easier to get it reworked. So, if I could go back, that would be the first thing I would change for us. But, looking at, I think it was the right decision for the city to move out. I think we would have had so many complaints about noise and smell, and dust was. We would have to turn the fire alarms off because dust would just set it off. So that if you guys are doing a major renovation, I would look heavily at if you can move folks away from the construction. Because you also have to look at the public has to come in and do business too. So.
Did the temporary location that you went to, you mentioned the rent or the $500,000, did it need a lot of fit up to accommodate you, or was it move right?
No, the space we didn't at all. I think it was already furnished for us, so that helped tremendously. Right. I think we did some security, some key card access stuff. But that's pretty much it.
And lastly, did you ever share with us a total project cost, including all of the soft costs? You shared the construction cost, but what was the total project cost? Do you have that?
The only thing I don't have like the rental cost of for renting out the new space and some of the moving costs, but we our consultant fees for design were around $1 million total. We hired a third-party construction manager for inspection. He stayed here the entire 20 months. That was around $600,000, I believe. And then some of those other soft costs that you mentioned, the IT trailer, that I think that ended up being to rent for 20 months. I think it was around $1,000 a month for that. And then, of course, we had to make that secure, so we added some costs. So there are a lot of costs that, if you just focus, a lot of costs outside of just construction that you need to look at.
If you could, without divulging city secrets, let us know what those other costs were, so we can just have an idea of what a total project cost is.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, that's all public information, so I can wrangle that up and send that over to the city manager.
Super.
Thanks, Jefferson.
Thank you so much.
Sounds like 10 to 15% all in though.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. You know, we had an old building, so when we opened up a wall, it was a different than what we thought. So, but we did a good job between the contractor and our design team and our third-party inspector. Really, construction costs they really dialed those down with change orders. I think we were only about, all in total, we were only about 4% change order on the construction side. So that's tremendous for this type of project.
Yeah. Normally there's a 10% contingency.
Yeah, 10 to 12% is what is normal.
Is there any forced hot water heating, or is it all through the air handlers?
So we have a backup with forced hot. Yeah, we have. You can see it behind me right here. The vents. That's backup through the boiler. We put new boilers in for that. But most of our heating and cooling is through heat pumps, mini splits.
Makes sense.
Sufficient. Other questions?
Well, great. Jefferson, I'll take up on your offer to send us some additional information relative to costs, and I'll share it with the group. And if you'll indulge us, I may bug you with future questions.
Oh yeah, for sure. And anytime I can help. Again, I think I talked to the city manager the other day, and I said I wish we would have gone through this process to look at someone that just went through it, so we could ask questions. That's very smart of you folks. So.
Thanks for being so generous with your time, Jefferson.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Have a good
Take
day.
care. Take care. You too.
Jefferson?
Did the city manager go searching, or all of you go searching for this type of project to get answers? It's amazing in Bangor, Maine, that you found this
Yeah,
pretty relevant.
I mean, we did a search to see what else was out there and want to learn lessons from others.
I mean, that seems pretty relevant, considering. It's good. Great.
A couple of interesting lessons, certainly about IT. That in the contract. Boy, if there were swing space we could rent, that would be nice.
Aren't they lucky to find a building
Yeah.
to move into?
What? Next item on the agenda is the summary of the police department matrix report. Did everyone get a chance to see this? In your packet.
I think it points out a couple of things, and this is something we asked for, to kind of get a finished report, but it also still says that we were doing a great job with our response time and everything, with 62 sworn staff, even though 70 are authorized. So, I mean, you can always come up with reasons why you need more people. But
I think we need to bear in mind that we're trying to look at this analysis in a long-term framework.
Yeah.
Long-term time frame of 20, 30 years. So we were all feeling the pressure of doing the budget the first time we looked at this matrix. Now we can step back and look at the 20-year picture.
I also think that that police department may have been able to survive the last several years at the low the below appropriate number of staffing, doesn't mean that that can continue and we can retain police officers. The wear and tear on police officers, the demands that have been put on them by having the understaffed department have been substantial. So I don't want it to go unsaid that, hey, we've gotten along with 62, why not keep doing that?
Yeah, I also think that looking at on page 1 and into page 2, the overtime hours and both in terms of just the hours logged and the burden that puts on both police and fire, because ultimately somebody's got to staff it. And that's, clearly not sustainable. And obviously my understanding and Mr. Assistant Chief, keep me honest on this, those are hard roles to recruit for right now. We get that, but we've got to find a way to bridge that gap because we can't continue to fall on our firemen and our police officers. That's just not a good way for us to run our organization.
Yes, Mike?
And if I could just add, and thanks to Deputy City Manager Weber and Monty for putting the summary report together. And it was a meeting or two ago that, and in large part, this was put together because of the perception that the police department was growing, possibly upwards of 80 to 90% of sworn staff in the next 10 years. So we just wanted to really drive home that point that it's a modest growth over a 10-year period. There's one recommended full-time police officer right now. That being said, that's a training position. There's 4 additional civilian staff right now. And then over time, you see the adjustment for 10 years. And I think it's important to note that regardless of whether we have, currently authorized for 70, whether we have at any given time 67, 66, 65, our response times aren't going to change with that number because we have minimum staffing levels that we have to have on the street at all given times. And those minimum staffing levels don't change with the number of personnel that we have employed. So our minimum response times will effectively be the same as they are at 70 as they are at 63 or 64, because regardless of how many staff we currently have employed, we have to have a minimum number of people on the street. So that kind of speaks to, the response times are good with 62 people. Well, yes, that's because we're mandating that we have a certain number of officers on the street at any given time. But to Commissioner Scher's point, what's it doing to those 62 people is the larger issue.
Yeah, and the overtime.
Correct. Right.
John?
And I think, an overriding question is, what is the function of this committee? I mean, the number of police officers and how many are budgeted is a city council decision.
Agreed.
And so we're not in a situation where I think we're not going to second guess what the city council does. So again, I think that we need to focus on the charge of this committee, and it isn't to determine how many officers are appropriate.
It strikes me that to follow up on that, as I recall way back when, it seems like a long time ago, but much of the point of the staffing study, as I recall, was to see how much space we needed in a new building or a portion of a new building rather than to decide what the appropriate staffing numbers are.
That's right. And the biggest number that fell out for me was the estimated space need.
40,000, 46.
Glad you had it on the top of mind. I didn't have it top of mind.
That's why we have numbers people.
Okay, I don't have a lot of skills. That happens.
Did this help clarify for people? The matrix conclusions were
I hope it clarified for the general public. I think, part of the issue is when you have a report that's, I forget how many pages long.
Almost 140, yeah.
It's,
Yes.
in 2025, and this is not a criticism, it's an observation. Attention spans are what they are, and I think it's not a reasonable expectation for us to think that the average constituent in Portsmouth is going to read that report in full to fully understand what the recommendation is. So to me, this summary table and this sort of information, I hope, will get us to a place where the public comment sessions going forward, when we get to these informational sessions where you all are meeting with the general public during, city council hearings, we're able to have a more effective dialogue and we're all talking about the same thing.
And even though she isn't here, this is in response to what Renee said, I think at one of our earlier meetings, is that we need to do a better job of making sure that people don't have the opportunity to misconstrue the numbers.
Correct.
140-page reports, TLDR. Too long, did not read.
Okay. I hope no one on this committee felt that way, but that's.
No, but when you're talking about the general public and the attention span, I think that's a world we live in.
Okay.
Okay?
This is clarifying though. Thank you to
Thank you.
the team for putting this together. I think the
Yeah.
deputy city manager, is that who worked on this? Yeah. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yes, and a good part of the record, for sure. Next, we had some input that some of the committee members had questions for JSA.
I think
So first of all, I'd like to introduce Richard Marks. And, Richard, can you give a quick description of where we're at?
Good.
And then get into the questions
Good.
that have been raised, just because it's important to understand that we are just at the start here.
so.
Keep saying that too.
And I won't say that 6 months from now. Today I will.
No, so as you're aware, we're in the initial programming phase, so we've been collecting all the existing documentation we need for the whole complex so we can start to build our initial space needs of what is existing today, how is the space being used, so we have something to work from. All the existing conditions of all the sort of MVP and things, everything that our team is going to need to have a baseline understanding to then work from. We getting that all collected. We're scheduling all the meetings and coordinating what we need to do with the city side of things to build our space needs assessment. So what is the existing staffing and levels? How are those going to change? Well, how public facing is that department or not? To what Jefferson said, there were specific departments that they really worked hard to move to the first floor to get more public facing. What are those departments for the city? Prioritize, start to understand the important adjacencies or not. So we're in the beginning phase of getting that all coordinated, which is logistically a lot, but that's what we're here for. So we're building that on that side, and then on the police, on the PD side, obviously we're much further along because of space needs assessments that Matrix did and ADG did early on. Ronnie, do you want to add any additional comment?
You're
muted, sir.
You're muted, Rodney.
You're muted, Rodney.
There we go. Thank you. I was trying to unmute it before and it wouldn't allow it. I'm Rodney McManus with Architects Design Group, and we did a initial spatial needs assessment back several years ago now. And then we have reviewed the Matrix staffing study, and there are some questions we have, and we haven't had the opportunity to speak with the city or the police department to kind of bridge those questions that we had. But there are differences. We've highlighted and identified all the rooms in our original study and compared them to all the rooms in the Matrix study. And we've been able to find 95% of the information that we need. A little bit more work needs to be done there. But I think one of the big things about how this project is different today than it was in the last iteration is that we're bringing over the city services side, so the city hall side of things, as well as the police department, which means that we'll be able to think more holistically about how this building can work versus only touching the police side and adding additional space for police. What we're hoping and what we're expecting is that we can find some efficiencies between the city hall services and the police services that can save the city some real estate. And so everybody knows that every square foot has a dollar amount attached to it. So we want to make sure that I beg your pardon?
I was being curt. You can ignore me.
Okay. But I just, things like the city chambers, perhaps that could be training or community resource work and things like that. So to find that efficiencies, to find better division and separation from City Hall and also the connection with the police is going to be an important thing. We have a police department that's going to be part of City Hall, so the security requirements on the police side are going to be significantly higher than what you would normally see in a City Hall. But we're still going to have to think through all the security at City Hall and how do you enter and where are those invisible lines of security so that the public can get where it needs to go, but the staff is all safe and they feel good and they feel secure in their work environments.
Thank you.
So then, unless there's any general questions, why don't we?
Yeah, Rodney, speak to the questions that Peter provided.
Right.
Sorry. Before we let Rodney go, Rodney, do we
Rodney's
have?
gonna stay.
Oh, okay. Do we have kind of that markup that you described where you've highlighted the spaces where there are specific variances between what you put forward and what Matrix put forward?
I've only shared with JSA.
Understood. Okay, so when you guys are done, no, it's fine. I just wanted to clarify.
We haven't had a chance to sit down and talk to and review it yet.
Okay, totally understand.
Right.
Thanks, Peter. And Rodney.
Sure.
Okay. So to the questions you sent over here, I'll give sort of a general statement and then we can sort of address each one individually. For a number of these, my answer is going to be probably some variation of yes, but at the end of the day, it's going to depend on the ultimate solution and whether it's in the interest of the city and the council. So I'll just kind of go question by question. The first question was, in the bottom level of the police station, is it possible to add windows and HVAC? Could we excavate and do a berm to expose that wall of the building? It's certainly possible. Whether it's worth the impact to do that will, I think, depend on the space plan, the ultimate space plan, and the expense of doing that, depending on the structure of that wall. Is that retaining the soil or not? So it's certainly possible, and we'll have to ascertain during design whether that's worth it, depending on what we're trying to fit down there or not.
Thank you.
Richard, could I add something there?
Absolutely.
There are lots of places in the police department that do not need light. They don't need windows. It's better not to have windows, like evidence storage and forensics and things like that. So there are quite a few locations in a police department that benefit from being without glazing. And so our goal would be to locate those services where they're best suited in the building, but have the proper security built in.
One of the problems we've heard over the past couple of years is that the dungeon doesn't work. So my question was, what can we do to that dungeon to make it more habitable?
Good question.
Part of the dungeon problem is mold and water, not just lack of windows.
That was part of the question I posed to them, because you obviously you're going to have HVAC in that leveled much better than it is today.
It's a safe assumption that HVAC work is going to be extensive and touch. If not every part of the building, the majority of it, just to get the conditions right. To avoid
I couldn't help but notice in some of the photographs Jefferson was sharing with us that they have what look like 16-foot ceilings and very large plenums. We don't have that downstairs. We have less than a foot in some cases above the ceiling. So ductwork and so forth is very difficult to retrofit down there.
Tricky.
Yeah.
We've been through it, so
Yep.
There's also a lot of columns.
I mentioned that. No, work around them. And actually, to your point of floor-to-floor heights and plenums, and your second question about where we add into the buildings, it'll be important to keep in mind as we look at the future designs that wherever we tack onto the building, wherever we connect, it's not like we'll be able to just take out the exterior wall and you can walk from one to the other. Those sorts of points where you cross between the buildings, there will have to be some separation where we make up those floor-to-floor differences. The existing building is much tighter than we would do for a newer building, so we'll have to deal with ramping or two-side elevators, ways to make up those elevation differences, which is not unlike what already happens in City Hall now.
A few locations, yeah.
A few locations between the buildings.
Makes sense.
So it'll just be slightly tricky. You had asked Peter about adding a second elevator to serve the third and fourth floor of the existing buildings. I think there's a conversation about whether that will be necessary or not. I think one important point to make.
Well, we're gonna lose the elevator that's now there, especially if the police take over the rest of what is now the second floor. We're not gonna want the public walking down there, but you also don't want the public to have to climb to the third and fourth floor.
Right, no, that'll absolutely.
So that was the reason I put that question.
That makes sense. So, yes, if we find that those elevators get absorbed into the PD and are now inaccessible to the public, then that's certainly a consideration we'll have to make, not only for the public but for the staff using the building to get to the floor. That being said, hopefully, one of the stated goals of this is to get the customer-facing functions more accessible. Hopefully, the need for the public to be using those elevators is going to be reduced because you can go right to the lobby and get to who you need to see, not go up to the fourth floor, take a left, take a right, and find your way down there. So hopefully that there will be less demand on the public side.
The number 2 question I had put there that you went by was, is it possible to do an addition of 10 to 12,000 square feet of new space coming out from the end of the current second floor where the tax collector, assessor's office, city clerk is, going out from there and then going down to connect with the existing police facility?
You're talking about over the driveway,
Yeah.
the current driveway?
Yeah.
So
Which then gets to one of my other questions. How do we reconfigure that parking lot out there?
I know there have been previously some studies of doing an addition out to the sort of the backside. It's certainly all possible. I think the hardest part about all of that is going to be how do you keep the automotive traffic and that circulation working effectively, which gets to your exact question. So do I have an answer for you today? No, because we need to study that. But I think it's possible, and I think it's our duty to look at an option like that, particularly given in the previous go around the concerns about building out front, obstructing the views. It is definitely in our best interest to look at an option back here to make sure whether it's viable or not, because that would probably address at least some of those concerns.
And that gets to the other question I had on, can the current parking lot in the rear of the police station be reconfigured to make it more workable? And, I think that a lot should be looked at back there.
It'll all be looked at. Yes. It's a tight space, so it'll be tricky. And if we're looking at an addition back there, it becomes certainly even more tricky. But that there might be a solution there that ultimately is in the best interest, but we have to see. We'll get there. Your fifth question, can a new entrance? That's what we just discussed, was the fourth question about the back parking lot.
Okay,
So
sorry,
back addition,
sorry.
back parking lot
Yeah.
all meshed together. About a new entrance for City Hall, that's absolutely doable, and I think the likely outcome of this is probably there is going to be some work, some new entrance, especially as we try to bring those public functions down. I think that'll be warranted. To what extent would be, obviously to be determined, but I think yes, that's likely.
And that's a high priority within this committee when we looked at our priorities, and it's a priority when the mayor and the
Definitely on our minds. Can the work be done in phases? Yes, and it will have to be, even if we don't have the benefit here of let's fully move out of the building like Bangor does.
That was one of the questions that I got from listening. Peter, your knowledge, because you know everything. Is there a building right now that's vacant that could be used like they did in Bangor?
McIntyre.
Not McIntyre.
That's a joke.
Last time we looked at this, there were, the Northeast Credit Union was available. I don't think that's on the table anymore. There was some commercial property down on Route 1. And we looked at a number of them, but the cost per square foot was pretty significant. And I forget the number, but we had a number in one of the original opinions of cost that said what it would cost to rent that property.
It was a multi-million-dollar
Yeah,
fit out
it was a
as
couple
well.
$1 million, as I remember. But a big chunk of it, but it was focused on PD.
Yep.
Because it was all about making sure that the PD had the security, they had all the things they needed to do to have a functional space. So if it's just, if PD is able to stay in the building and we're just relocating
Municipal, that number's
other
right
folks, it might not be as expensive and it might not be as difficult. But it comes down to what we've always envisioned is creating swing space. It's the Tetris, you build something, you move people, you build, move. And yes, it's very inconvenient. Yes, it's disruptive. People will not like it. When we did the facade rebuild with new windows on this end of the building, we had to do air quality monitoring throughout because people were concerned about, the materials that they could potentially be exposed to.
Sure.
We did the best we could to minimize noise. And it was disruptive. People were, just not happy.
And the other,
That was, that.
and the other
That's the way
thing
life
is,
is sometimes.
it depends if you're looking to move everybody out or just have a rotating. I mean, I was part of it when we did it with Blue Cross, and we rented a space over, in Bedford, and we moved people in and out as needed because it was basically just a big office space. And so, it can be done depending upon who you're moving in and who you're moving out, and if it's just office space that you're looking at, who knows what's available at that point in time.
The complicating factor, of course, is in terms of phasing and moving people in, moving people out, is you can't just put the police department. When the police department needs to move, you can't just put them in office space.
I understand.
And that's the complicating factor.
That's
in
what
the
Peter was
phasing.
alluding to, is that the idea with the PD would be that Tetris that he described, where we wouldn't be moving anyone out of PD. We'd be keeping them in their secure facility and moving things around incrementally. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
It might be that the PD space temporarily grows out into others, what are currently city spaces, so that they're staying on the campus and they ebb and flow a little bit so that we can do work within the, current. Yeah.
And if we do end up doing an addition of any kind, that's ideal because it's a construction project that's happening without affecting the interior, and then we're moving people into the addition, then coming in.
Build the new, move into the new, then backfill, to the extent that's possible.
You'll have to remember that it's not just the PD that's difficult to move, though. The clerk's office is particularly challenging because of the records retention requirements for the clerk. So, and the safe. So, that's really the challenging piece on the second floor besides the PD, is the clerk's office.
Makes sense.
My seventh and eighth questions were, I'm sure you are gonna do a current, space not being used by the city or the police department, an amount of space that's currently vacant or used by others.
Yes, that's what we're building right now because that gives us
And
that
then
gives us our baseline.
My last question was, is there a way to reconfigure the current entrance to the police facility?
Absolutely. There's certainly a way to what extent and what that looks like will depend on, are we building out the front, building out the back, do we both? But
Those are the questions that came to mind to me that I'd like to have a chance to get the answers to and the costs involved.
no, absolutely. And we will be able to give you more concrete answers and
Yeah.
possibilities as we get into design.
And I think this process is fluid and it's set up so that ideas, as individuals come up with the ideas, they present them. I don't expect you to have answers to them, but it's food for thought, and that's the purpose of it.
We appreciate that, and that's why we're all here.
Other questions or ideas for the team? This is the chance.
I think, we're at a very preliminary stage, so I look forward to learning more as you go through the process. It seems like we've engaged a great firm, so we're in good hands.
Thank you.
The only question, the additional question I would have is, I think the elephant in the room, in a sense, is cost. And I appreciate you build to a point where you can make estimates about cost. Do you have any sense in terms of work that still needs to be done before we start to hear estimates about cost of various alternatives? Or I don't want to pick a specific date, but just in terms of
that's more of a end of the year, beginning of next year sort of thing. Right now we're in the stage of building our space needs and understanding, particularly the city side of things, because that work hasn't been done today. Whereas in the PD side, there's been a lot of great work that's already been done to date. Then we can start to figure out what those options would potentially look like, and then we can start to cost those. But we will be costing multiple options and developing them to the point that we can give probable costs. A lot of times there might be a good, better, best, or there's going to be variations so that we can say, this will work. It's not everything that you've asked for, but it works. But here's where that lands. If we want to get everything that we truly desire, we can do that, but it's going to cost you much more, so that the city council can make an informed decision about what is in the best interest of the city, because you do have to balance the costs with the actual function.
Thank you.
There's no gilding the lily. It'll all have to be responsible with taxpayer dollars, and that's why we're doing this process.
I had a question about this space here. Where it goes and what can be done with it. It collects water. Sometimes it's a duck puddle and sometimes it's a skating rink. And I'm just wondering about
So this
that
is
extent.
Yeah, so this flat area, the flat
Yeah.
roof behind you, that's a completely separate structure, which is great. That could be removed. We did look at concepts where there was an atrium there.
Yeah.
Where we had point of service within that space. That's another possibility. It's also, if nothing else happens to that space, directly beneath it is the PD, so it could have a giant, it could be daylit with skylights, all sorts of things to get more light down to whatever that space is used for in the future. But luckily, that's a completely separate structure that was done at a different date. It could be taken out. There's a lot of ledge there.
It can't be added onto?
Sure, it could, sure. You just lose all the lights, the windows
sure.
on either side, all the way up. The vault that they referred to earlier is right behind you, that brick bump out for the city clerk, so that's something to consider.
Okay.
I think this is is more a question for city staff. Since we're talking about the whole building, we currently have one department represented beyond the city manager's department, but clearly the schools department is also located in this building. At what point, is there an intention to bring somebody in, at least to these discussions, so that they're aware of the process?
So what Richard referred to is that we're starting the discussions with all the departments, including school department.
Okay.
So it's, working with the city manager and all department heads, that's the exercise that's just getting started.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure we don't overlook somebody by accident.
Nope.
Okay.
Feedback from everyone. Okay, any other feedback for JSA or questions?
One quick thing. Due to the grades of the property and the idea of having ADA access and also public, a public point of service that might have better way in, this wing on the south side seems to have a lot of potential, especially on the back side for a possible addition, and because it's awfully thin. And I wouldn't want to rule that out because it also wouldn't affect the circulation pattern, which needs work. And, the outside site plan is pretty bad, but there is space back there. And, the grades come in more reasonably. It also wouldn't affect the view from the city looking up at the building. So I think it's should be thought about it. Just take a peek at it.
Absolutely.
I was also going to point out at the front entry, our current entry space, you come up a floor, essentially.
Sorry.
So what's underneath that space is currently occupied by police, part of that facility. But if we are talking about reconfiguring their space so it's more useful for them, maybe that space becomes an entry point for City Hall, so you're not climbing stairs. So it's something to be thinking about that underfloor there.
One of the things for at new business, I guess we all got an email on why don't we build a new police station at Foundry Place. I just want to reiterate that that's not part of this committee's decision of whether or not we go out and build a new police station on a piece of city property.
It's not our charge.
I would also point out that the work that was done by the original working group made it pretty clear that a new freestanding police station, the cheapest it could be done was around $65 million or $62 million.
And that was a year ago.
And that was a year ago, so that's probably gone up another million or two. Yeah.
Probably is not a good word.
So, yeah, even though it's just not an option realistically.
We've researched that option thoroughly.
Before we finish, I thought we'd just dwell a little bit on the next meeting. Do you think that we could have any discussion, an agenda item on reconciling ADG and Matrix, or is that rushing things?
When is the next meeting? Is it calendared?
2 weeks.
I would say it's the 13th off the top
Well, I
of my head.
wasn't sure if we had, because we'd moved the schedule a little bit. There were some offsetting.
13th,
Yeah.
13th and the 27th, and I put that on the agenda. The 27th happens to be a Jewish holiday. I don't know.
Anyone observed?
So, we can do that reconciliation, that's fine. I would question the utility of, spending a lot of time on that because the Matrix was a greenfield design. It assumed a blank slate somewhere versus working in a building like this. So to ultimately, the programming of the police department and the program of City Hall is going to drive the square footage of the impacts. So, we can spend the time doing it. I'm just not sure there's utility for spending a lot of time. I think it's worth going through and just pointing out some of the differences, which, Rodney, I don't want to speak for you and Richard in terms of whether you'd be ready in 2 weeks to do something like that. But I would just bear in mind that, yes, an interesting data point, but it's really not pertinent to this project per se.
No, I think when we get the full program of the space we need.
Yeah.
If I may, through the chairs, I have a thought about the meeting cadence. In the interest of preserving as much of the scope and money for the work of the consultants to be put toward what they need to do to come back to us, I'm concerned that meeting every 2 weeks means an expectation that Richard and Rodney will come every 2 weeks. They may not have a whole lot to share on an every 2 week basis, and I selfishly would rather preserve their time and dollar value into generating the work that for when they're ready to present to us. So, at the risk of sounding a little like we're changing gears a little bit, I think every 2 weeks might be a little
For
little
now,
too much.
yes.
For this.
Yeah.
For
When
now,
we have more information, maybe that cadence changes, but I don't disagree.
at this stage, there's a lot of information collecting we need to do. And we can tell you we're collecting the information, but we need to do that information collecting
We
before
hear
we
we're
can start
collecting the
to.
information every 2 weeks. I think that's a bad use of your time and ours, so I would second the city manager's suggestion on that front.
So I'll move our next meeting be on the 24th of September.
Second.
No, because Peter had a good point. That is Rosh Hashanah. I would push it to Wednesday, October 1st.
I'll accept that friendly amendment.
That's good.
And that is a day before Yom Kippur, so I think we're safe, but we can confirm that.
Okay.
Should we consider the 24th, since that's exactly, or excuse me, the 17th, since that's 3 weeks out? Do you think that we'll have
I don't
progress
think
by?
that-
Okay. I
That's
don't
them,
know.
but I think that's pushing it.
Okay.
Okay, first.
Next week is Labor Day. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Fine.
October 1st.
October 1st sounds like a wonderful day to me.
Can we do that by
I
consensus?
just said the second.
Consensus.
Yeah.
Oh,
October 2nd or 1st?
October
No,
1st,
October
first,
1st.
it's a Wednesday. At this time, at 3 o'clock.
Unless some super opportunity for swing space comes up or something we need.
Okay.
Will we adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.